Hi, Sergio.
Hello.
Could you please introduce yourself?
Absolutely. I'm Sergio Cruz. I'm a UI engineer and instructor. I have a passion for just teaching people and onboard them into this crazy field that we're in. I currently work at Pluralsight, really the code school division of Pluralsight. And there, I get to write a lot of code. I get to record a lot of videos and instructional videos and whatnot. It's pretty fun. But that's my life in a snapshot. Tend to go to a lot of conferences as well.
And you're presenting at ng-conf?
That's right. I'm a speaker at ng-conf. I talked about difficulties people face when upgrading from AngularJS to Angular. Talked a little bit about my history with Angular, how I got started. You see, at the time, I went to the Angular website, downloaded the source code, and threw it on my HTML. That's not how development works anymore. These days, if you're going to start a new application, be it Angular or even other frameworks, you're just running an npm install, right? So it's a much different world that we live in today. And I talked a little bit about that. Some people, unfortunately, they're still doing that, right? Just downloading it, throwing it on your project, including through script tags, and there are some challenges with that.
So, what kind of challenges do people encounter when they try to do the actual upgrade?
Lots of them. I think, in my experience, the most difficult part with the upgrade is more so getting your project ready for it. There are recommended ways of writing AngularJS apps today, and if people follow those, it'll be fairly straightforward to go from AngularJS to Angular. As an example, component-based architecture, right? If you're just using that instead of using some obscure directives, it'll be more directly transferable from one to the other. The problem is, with AngularJS not being a very opinionated framework, there are many different interpretations and ways that people approach writing apps. Right. And that's where the difficulty lies, like kind of meeting where that person is, getting them where they need to be to then be primed for an upgrade. And I feel like that's where we usually spend most of our time.
And so what does that priming usually look like? Yeah,
definitely. So I usually recommend, let's start using TypeScript, for example. Let's start using modules. So be it through Webpack or Browserify. So that would mean that instead of using something like Bower or manually downloading scripts, let's just use the npm or Yarn. So as you can see, you can start seeing a pattern like this whole modern JavaScript flow. That's usually where we start by and what we do to get where we need to be.
So one of the changes that I saw in Ember world before this was probably around a couple of years ago, was moving from the global namespace to modules. So this was when companies were moving from pre-Ember CLI to Ember CLI. Mm-hmm. So in that process, they were splitting up files into and basically refactoring their globals into modules, like ES6 modules. Well, is that something similar to what you are doing in Angular?
Absolutely.
JS upgrade?
That's exactly what we tend to do. And it's a whole different approach. It's a different mentality, right? And it's honestly even a little intimidating for some, right? Because in lots of different ways, you feel like you lose some of the control because you're deferring that to tools that are made available to you, which I personally love, but sometimes it can feel like, it's overwhelming or you don't really understand what's happening anymore because a lot of it has been automated for you. So getting people in this, modern JavaScript mentality is definitely where the main problem lies, right? If you follow the happy path, if you've used TypeScript with AngularJS, NPM, mostly components, it'll just be a matter of getting the Angular upgrade stuff in and start upgrading component by component until we have a fully, Angular 2 plus code base ready.
I remember when we've done this upgrade, going to Ember CLI with modules, like EX6 modules, it kind of felt like you started to do programming. You went from scripting to actually like, oh, I'm a programmer now.
Exactly, exactly. It definitely feels a little bit more like Java in a way.
Yeah.
Like you're importing things in every time.
It feels more professional in a way, right?
It does. But it feels more professional for those that are like experienced. I tend to be around people who are just starting out, and that's where that imposter syndrome kicks in, and they're like, I'm not good enough for this. I don't know anything about modules. Oh my goodness, what's happening? And surprisingly, there seems to be like very little material out there to get these people comfortable with this workflow. I feel like there's no clear path of like, hey, you learn JavaScript, you learn HTML. Here, use the Ember CLI or use the Angular CLI. It's like, holy crap! But what even, what happened in between there? So,
it seems that transitioning people's mindset from global scope to modules could be its own class, like right?
Yes.
Because there is a class on writing ES6 modules,
right?
And there's a class on writing JavaScript, but there isn't the class of like, well, you've got a bunch of JavaScript now. How do you move to ES6 modules?
Exactly.
So that could be a plural site class right there.
That could be for sure. And when I help people upgrade, be it friends, consulting clients or what have you, like I said, that's where I spend most of my time. Now, the upgrade path with Angular is pretty interesting because I don't think this ever happened with Ember. You don't run two different versions of a framework within the same app. You're either in one or the other, right? With React, it'd be the same thing. You're either on one or the other. With Angular, because they're effectively different frameworks, you're running AngularJS and Angular on the same app. And the worst, you're getting them to communicate, right? So let's talk a little bit about dependency injection. You might have a service that you need to inject from AngularJS to Angular, or from Angular to AngularJS. How do you bridge that? So there are all these different strategies to go about it, but it's extra tricky because of that. You're effectively using two frameworks at once. It's easier than it sounds. I promise you. It sounds like whatever mad science, right? When I describe it. But they have great guides and great documentation on how you can go about it with the different strategies and whatnot.
How similar does the upgrade look from one application to another? Or how different is it for all the different applications that are out there?
Yeah, and so I was talking about AngularJS not being a very opinionated framework, right? And all of the different interpretations that people have. It all depends on how they built it. And there are so many different ways of building an AngularJS app. And I feel like if you followed the style guide, say John Papa's style guide for AngularJS, you'll start having some standards that will make your life a whole lot easier, and it'll be more similar from application to application to application. I feel like there aren't a whole lot of tutorials and blog posts around this very thing that we're talking about because of that. You could have built it one way, and I could have the other, and now third person's trying to write a blog post, and it's not a valid use case for you nor for me.
And it's hard to Google, right?
How do you?
How do you describe something that is...
I wrote it this way. How do I... Oh, wait. That was my own black magic that I was trying to come up with over here. So there's no Google for that.
I've seen upgrades that where you have in Ember where you had to do a bunch of cleanup first, but then you have to get somebody to explain to you what's actually going on, and it's like, they'll tell you like a novel of like of how this was architected. And I'm like, just the fact that you're telling me a novel is a sign that something's off, right? But how do you actually find a path from that? And that takes skill. And by the time you finish the upgrade, you have that skill, right? But you're done with the upgrade. So
absolutely.
Yeah, so it's challenging. From the work that you've done with clients, how long would you say an upgrade typically take?
So that's an interesting question. It means many different things for many different people, okay? I'm actually not going to use a client as an example. I'm going to use an internal team at Pluralsight who went through this process. They had a fairly large application. We're talking about, give and take, 60,000 lines of code. It took them in total 3 months to fully migrate from one to the other. It's a team of 4 or 5 engineers. Now here's the interesting thing. It took 3 months, so they were running at the time ng-upgrade for 2 months and a half pretty much. And by that 2 months and a half, they had half of their application in Angular and the other half still in AngularJS. And they just decided to kind of stop everything and do a 2-week sprint and just get it done. And it worked like a breeze. And so in theory, it could have been a whole lot faster. It's just that you're trying to upgrade and ship features and fix bugs and all of the different business priorities that are happening, right? But yeah, I mean, but for them, they followed the style guide and they were already using TypeScript for AngularJS and whatnot. So they were the perfect candidate for, an upgrade, and it worked out.
So what did they when they took the 2-week kind of break to focus on, and so what did they actually do during that time? Did they stopped building features and they were just doing the upgrade? And what
pretty
did they
much,
do?
yeah. Okay. They just said, we're going to focus on code quality.
Okay. For
now, let's try to hold off on new features and bug fixes and whatnot. I wasn't in that team when that happened, so this is me hearing stories and and having a blast at it because it's pretty cool. So yeah, but yeah, they kind of stop everything, rewrite it. If there are any directives, any services or whatnot that are still with AngularJS, that just becomes TypeScript classes, exported, use a little injectable,
and so they actually refactored the AngularJS code to Angular in those 2 weeks, or?
That's right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, at the end of those 2 weeks, they had no more AngularJS code at all. So, now in an ideal world, they probably could have done it a lot faster if they didn't have their actual jobs to do, right? Because our jobs is not just to stop and make sure the code base is the best. I mean, that'd be great, but it's usually more so we're shipping features and especially for them, they do the checkout portion of Pluralsight. They essentially take your money when you pay. So that's a pretty important thing to be responsible over, right? So of course, if something's broken, they got to stop everything and fix that right away, because otherwise it essentially means that the business can't take your money if you're a customer. So,
and for that team in particular, do you know if they were using testing at all in the process?
Yeah, they were. They were. However, they weren't using testing specifically to Angular. What I mean by that is that Angular provides a whole lot of testing tools. They decided to just test JavaScript itself. Okay. So they were using Mocha and Chai, if I'm not mistaken. I hope I'm not misquoting them on this. But basically what that meant is that they were already using TypeScript, so they were just testing classes. Okay. So when going from one framework to the other, not a whole lot changed, except that now, whatever, if your class has more methods as a result of the upgrade or more properties, then you're making sure that you're covering that on your test suite. But yeah, because of this approach that they took, it didn't require like a major overhaul or anything. I've honestly never experienced an upgrade where people were using all of the AngularJS testing, and then move over. I'd be actually pretty curious to know what that would be like.
I'm curious too. Yeah. And are there any resources that are available to make the upgrading process easier? Definitely.
So every time I execute an upgrade, I use the official Angular upgrade guide, and that's on their docs on angular.io. Okay. And the reason for that is because minor things change all the time as they bump up versions and whatnot. So that's a great resource. I've been playing around with doing videos for that because I follow that guide, and I mean, we're talking like thousands and thousands of words on the screen. I mean, when you're scrolling the page, like you're you know, like the little thing that indicates what part of the page, right? It's like this tiny, right? Because there's so much reading to do. I love to do a video on that to just, you know, help individuals have like a visual of what that actually feels like. I have a feeling not a whole lot of people have done that because the process changes so much. I have a feeling, you know, there's a little bit of risk there, but I've been asking people, is this something that you're interested in? Because if not, I'm just not going to waste my time. You know, the whole idea here is to help people out. If that's something that they feel that, you know, would help them go from point A to point B, I would love to help and bridge that gap. But as of right now, the main resource I use, like I said, are the guides. It's a lot of text. Get ready to do a lot of reading, some copy and pasting, you know, Stack Overflow style copy and pasting code here and there to get things to work and go to town. But from a technical standpoint, it's not very challenging, to be honest. Okay. It's more tedious than it is challenging. And like I said in the beginning, for me, the most time is spent getting the code base where it needs to be with all of the tooling, right? So ideally Webpack or Browserify for modules, NPM and all of that. TypeScript. TypeScript is a pretty big one. Something I recommend. It's not a must. Let me make that clear. People say it's possible to, you know, do Angular without it. I've never done it myself though. So I just say, listen, this is the happy path. Let's take the happy path. Let's not fight, you know, the best practices and
it pays off long term.
Oh, it does.
Right? And the short term I hear too. It's a quick win.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's nice. You know, you can rely on your code base. There are types and whatnot. So
that's
pretty
nice,
cool.
Yeah. More of the professional development.
Yes, yes.
So if someone wanted to reach out and ask you questions about the upgrade or anything about this conversation, how can they find you on the internet?
Definitely. So I'm on Twitter at #Serge, weird name. So #Serge on Twitter, or feel free to email me, hello@sergiocruz.me. And I'd be happy to chat. Great. Love helping out, and yeah, it's pretty nice.
Awesome. Thank you very much for giving this talk, and thank you for talking to me today.
Definitely. Thanks for having me. It's just very fun. Thank you.
I'm glad.
All right. Thanks.
Hey there. Are you into reactive programming using JavaScript? Do you have to deal with asynchrony in your web app? Then join this instructor Ben Lesh to learn all of the ins and outs of RxJS in his hands-on workshop. Available online and in person, go to rxworkshop.com for more details and to book your spot today. Hey there. Do you use Angular? Do you like fun in the sun? And how do you feel about boats? If you're nodding yes, then come join us on ng-cruise to learn more about Angular while on a fabulous Caribbean cruise. Check out ng-cruise.com for speaker lineup, workshop details, and to book your spot today.